So please join me in welcoming Stephanie Russell to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. This is a very passionate topic that I'm going to be speaking about today. A little bit of background on myself. I am the Economic Development Manager for Georgia Municipal Association, and I'm also the Program Manager for the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative, and I'll be talking a little bit about that today as well. So once again, just very happy to be here. And I look forward to hearing your feedback. This session has a workshop component to it at the very end, so we'll be able to do some engagement with you and get your thoughts and ideas as I present this information. Feel free to jump in at any time if you have a question. I'll be going through the presentation, then we have some video that I'd like to show you, and then we'll go right into the workshop component. So, but at any time, throw a question in the chat. I'll be keeping my eye on that, or raise your hand if you want to hop in. So with that being said, I'm going to pull up my presentation and we're going to get started. So once again, I'm with the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative, and I will go into some details about what we do here in the state of Georgia. But my main focus, and something I'm incredibly passionate about, is equitable and inclusive place-based development. So in order to really explain what that is, I am going to give you kind of a quick and dirty history about American city development. Once again, I work for Georgia Municipal Association, so we work with all the cities in the state of Georgia. But place-based economic and community development is a paradigm shift from traditional top-down development practices to a more inclusive bottom-up approach. And you're going to hear me use the word bottom-up quite a bit today, because this is really how we get into the communities and how we make this paradigm shift from traditional economic development. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the history of cities. So the American city, and what's currently known as what you would consider your downtown or your central commercial district, developed during the industrial era. And that was in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. So at that time, your downtowns were the heart of a community. They made up the entire city, in fact. So they were walkable, they were livable, they were social, they were the center of the community's economy, as well as the cultural center. And then we transition into the mid-19th century and late 19th centuries, and we consider this the transportation era. So the railroad became that prominent mode of transportation, and it delivered goods and services to these industries that were beginning to spring up in the cities. So by the late 19th century, with the rail lines and industrialism expanding at a very rapid pace, this happened very quickly. That once American downtown just began to experience sprawl, because there was so much growth and development happening in those areas. It started to sprawl out. So over the next few decades, factories, residences, and churches began to relocate out of their downtowns. And the types of businesses and uses that remained were predominantly commercial and civic based. So by the 20th century, downtowns were transposed into these specialized commercial districts. And then we get into the early 20th and mid-20th centuries, and this is what we call the second motor age. You have extensive road development. You're looking at once again, your downtowns becoming decentralized, and you've got that sprawl happening. And then you have this new standard for city development and planning that emerged. This is critical as we're going to be talking about place-based economic and community development. This is really what transitioned into that modern development and planning, is this idea of these new city standards based around the motor and the motor industry. So you have an automobile-centric development process that now is in place and stays in place for a very long time. So we move into the mid-20th, late 20th centuries, and thus emerges the suburbs. So the suburb development, but they're very specific. You take that commercial shopping, the old department stores that used to be in the downtown, that commercialized development that was in your downtown gets moved out into the suburbs in the form of strip malls. So you're left with these neglected downtowns. And once again, this continuance of this automobile-centric planning is continuing to happen. And then we also see this top-down economic development practice. And the suburbs were geared towards a very specific socio-demographic. It was very exclusive. So we're in the 60s at this point, and this wonderful woman, activist, visionary, Jane Jacobs, and I'm sure you've heard of her before, she says that cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. Jane saw this need to create a sense of place in communities, and this is that paradigm shift that we're talking about. And she attempted to do this by focusing on the social life and public spaces, but it was once again, her efforts were eclipsed by urban planning ideology and that automobile-centric development. Jane Jacobs did predict that freestanding individual buildings would put an end to urban spaces and the city life and results in lifeless cities devoid of people. And we saw this transition happen in our downtowns. So in the early 80s, the National Main Street Center introduced a pioneering approach to downtown revitalization, and that was the Main Street approach. It offers communities revitalization initiatives with a practical, acceptable framework for downtown transformation. It's tailored to your local community. The approach helps communities get started with revitalization and grows them over time. And it really does utilize the community input. So many cities across America embrace this, and you start seeing this in the late 20th, early 21st century, this downtown revitalization movement happening. And it's focused on historic preservation. We have that recession component that comes in, which is really interesting how that affected our downtown development, because it really hit our retail pretty hard. And we see that again with COVID. But you do see this brick and mortar retail decline because we have online shopping that starts to come up. So we start looking at different ways to revitalize our downtowns. We do see some gentrification that starts happening, and we'll talk a little bit about the negative effects of gentrification in a little bit. But really, truly, we're looking at environmental sustainability and that live, work, play environment. This is Ed McMahon, if you're not familiar with him. He is with the Urban Land Institute, just a brilliant mind, has been studying downtowns for a long time. And he says that they're important because they're the heart and soul of any community. Who wants to go to the strip center and hang out? People just go and buy what they want and leave. But people will go to the downtowns of America and they will hang out and they will come back. That was our model of development in this country for about 300 years. We called it a town. And so that takes you back to what I was talking about earlier when I started the quick and dirty history of American city development. Towns and cities were centralized. Everything was available in that central location. And it really was a live, work, recreation type of an environment. And we're trending back towards that, and it's important. But we need to trend back towards that in a very equitable and inclusive way. I'm going to talk about that today and why we are very interested in practicing place-based economic and community development. So current 21st century, here we are. So we're going through this process of placemaking and community-led development. It's starting to get some traction. Once again, this concept's been around since the 60s, but really eclipsed by autocentric development standards, particularly when it comes to cities and city ordinances and city planning departments. Those have been the biggest challenges for developers as well as for citizens, is to have the local legislation support this type of development, this new form of development. So with placemaking and community-led development, you're looking at more environmental sustainability. You're looking at alternate transportation and different ways to connect the city, different parts of the city with each other, activating those public spaces. Its nature in general is diverse and inclusive. And then you're also looking at heritage and cultural preservation. And I do want to throw COVID in. COVID's been an interesting factor in all of this because public spaces have been seriously affected by COVID. But at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of success in the state of Georgia with our downtown businesses because of COVID. It's a very interesting, we're still looking at the data for that, but it's a very interesting concept that people have kind of turned back to that shop local to support their local businesses. And we've seen that here in the state of Georgia, and I'd love to get feedback from other people on that, what they're seeing in their states. But it's definitely, the door is wide open for this type of development, considering the transitions that we've been making over the last 20 years, but particularly with COVID, we have some really great opportunities. So I want to talk to you a little bit about traditional approaches. So community leaders across the country, the state, and our cities really share a desire to create high quality jobs, get more young adults and diverse workers into those jobs, and that helps expand incomes, reduce inequality, and aging out in communities. We're seeing a lot of that coming about with the boomers retiring. We're getting some aging out. And making sure that we're keeping our core industries competitive, because we do live in a global, competitive, technologically innovative society, and we need to stay on top of that, even in our smaller cities. But unfortunately, our traditional tools and approaches for economic development are just not suited to meet these goals that we have of this new economy that we're living in this new lifestyle of development and business and growth. So your traditional economic development is a top-down approach, and it's composed of long-standing practices of building housing, retail centers, pad-ready sites, and with that hope of attracting that target industry. And you know, the goal behind that is truly noble. It's to augment the workforce and increase the tax base. So it has great goals. It's just that this approach is just, it's antiquated at this point. It becomes costly with incentives, and we see more of a zero-sum game when it comes to developers and cities and communities. It absolutely, under no circumstances, addresses social issues and economic gaps. It completely ignores that. So it's not always beneficial for the community and the demographic and the culture. And I call it the fishing approach, where you have the leadership of a city sending somebody out to go fishing to bring in a developer. That's the top-down approach. We're going to talk about a bottom-up approach and how that looks in your communities. And once again, this is more of a modern approach to economic and community development. It is bottom-up. This philosophy of place-based approach is rooted in placemaking theory. It starts by encouraging collaboration. It's getting the community invested, getting the community involved, listening to what the community has to say and what the community wants and needs. It focuses more on holistic improvements instead of those, oh, we're just going to build a pad site or we're going to develop this piece of property out. There's a more holistic approach to this. It's based in visualization and envisioning and place visioning. It requires local facilitation. So you're getting that, once again, that bottom approach, you're getting that homegrown facilitation. It is inclusive and equitable by nature. So you're getting that community input and you're having different people at the table than what you've traditionally had at the economic development table. Its main focus, where we start with the place-based approach, is we look at the unique physical and social assets of a community, and we build on what the community already has. And the ultimate goals for us are not just about workforce development and increasing the tax base. It's about enhancing the quality of life for everyone in the community. It's creating a sense of place, identity, and we do this through community vision and community planning. Once again, I have to stress this, it is a paradigm shift. It is a paradigm shift for our local leaders and our businesses and our community members to create inclusive and prosperous communities. We're looking to increase our innovation and technology and have that available to everybody in the community. It's a better utilization of community assets because you have more people coming to the table. You have more people sharing ideas and more people contributing to that bottom-up layer of foundational of growth. And it's truly about implementing a community vision. And one thing that this approach truly does is it combats decline in spatial inequality. And it's a means once again, lay that foundation and build on what you already have, address those issues, both social and economic, and keep continuing to build. As you build that community and you develop that community with a vision, you're going to start seeing that your community will attract the development, will attract the residents, will attract the workforce that the community can sustain and that the community can thrive off of. This is Mayor Nancy Harris from the city of Duluth, Georgia, and she is a maverick when it comes to place-based economic development. I met her about 7 years ago, and what they're doing in this little is amazing. And she says, "To thine own self be true. There are unique and interesting subtleties of the city. Just as Shakespeare's Hamlet quotes from the play, each city must identify its own self and be true to its local character. Staying true to the roots that give a place its mojo is critical to a project's success." And she loves using the term mojo in her city, and she believes that every city has its own mojo, and that you need to mine that mojo and find your narrative and build on that narrative. So before we get into the actual process of how we do this in Georgia, I really want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's really important to understand how that relates to economic and community development. So with diversity, the questions that we're going to ask are, who is at the table? Are you representing your demographic when you're out there doing development? Is your demographic being considered? Are they being invited to the table? Are they being asked to participate? Are you getting that community feedback prior to doing development, prior to seeking out developers? And these are hard questions to ask for sometimes for our elected leadership and for our staff that works in development. And my background is in city development, and I have been a city employee, so I understand that. But I am such a proponent of taking a pause and getting that community input and bringing that community voice to the development table. And it really does need to be representative of the members of your community. So when we talk about equity in economic and community development, we're talking about what are the barriers to getting to and staying at that table. So, you might be recognized that, yes, you're part of the community, but are you being invited, and are you being asked to stay at the table and participate as a stakeholder? And we're going to talk about community stakeholders in a little bit. And then inclusion. Once we get the table and the people assembled around the table, do all feel like they belong at the table and have a voice? And I'll give you an example of that when we talk a little bit about our placemaking collaborative. We want everyone to feel like they're invited to the table and that they have a voice and that they're able to stay at the table and participate. So in the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative, we have some very specific diversity, equity, and inclusion practices that are built into our program. The first is that any of our participating communities go through a demographic analysis. We do that specifically so that we can root out what that composition of their community team is going to look like. We then do an asset inventory and a mapping of all of their community assets. And once again, I mentioned that we're looking at physical, social, any type of asset that we can use to build this foundation of development. And then it's very important that we have community and cultural representation on our community teams, and that's so that they can identify community issues and needs and then establish a community vision. So we have this process that we teach this community team. Once again, this is a bottom-up approach. It starts with identifying issues and needs and then establishing a community vision. The community vision is then integrated into all development projects. So that means public and private as well. So if you have, that's where you have to get the buy-in from, not just from the community, but also the community working with the local leaders, the governmental leaders, and the staff and the community. So that when developers come into the city or the community, they are aware and they're being made aware of this vision and the type of development that the citizens in the community have all agreed upon and want to see happen. And that sounds really okay. And this process is our Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative. It's a 3-year program, and the curriculum looks like this. Year 1 is education, visioning, and planning. So once again, we bring these community teams together and we teach them how to do economic and community development in their community. We teach them to be the experts. Year 2 is project development, funding, and implementation. And then year 3 is tracking and impact analysis. These are our partners for the Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative. We have Georgia Cities Foundation, which is an arm of Georgia Municipal Association. They're a CDFI funding mechanism. The Georgia Conservancy, Georgia Tech, Carl Vinson Institute of Government from the University of Georgia, the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, the Project for Public Spaces, and one of our biggest sponsors is Georgia Power. So what's really great about our collaborative is that each community team has a facilitator that stays with them for the 3-year process. And our facilitators are absolute rock stars on the state level. They come from University of Georgia, they come from our Department of Community Affairs, and they come from the Georgia Conservancy. They are all practitioners on the state level. They are also all volunteers and do this free of charge. And once again, they stay with that community team for 3 years during this process. So our program objectives are to teach this process to our community teams. So our community teams are made up of a team leader, which is someone from the city, an elected official, members of the Chamber of Commerce, members of faith-based organizations, business owners, development authority members. We try to make sure that the team has a representation of the demographic. So you could have just any citizen on the team. We encourage different age groups to be on the team. And then we bring these teams together twice a year to do training retreats, to teach them this process. And this process begins with visioning, and then it goes into planning, and then goes into project development. It's what we consider high-level economic development. So we're literally training the community how to be economic development managers and economic development partners with the city or the local government. The product that comes out of this program is an action and an implementation plan, and that ties very closely into that vision, that community vision. And we start by doing an asset inventory. And then we also work with Project for Public Spaces, and we teach them the 5 placemaking steps, if you're familiar with those. Okay, we're going to take a little break here from our presentation. And I'm going to have Rusty bring up that video, but before we start the video, Rusty, I'm going to see if there's any questions that I could answer about place-based economic development.
There are a few questions under the Q&A tab.
Okay.
Can you see those, Stephanie?
Oh, here we go. I was not on that. Okay. Oh, great question. The community applies through Georgia Municipal Association. We do applications once a year. Currently, we have 14 communities, and we have cities of all sizes. I have a city that's 2,000 all the way up to a city that's 70, 80,000. This year, we brought on an Atlanta neighborhood, which is English Avenue, Vine City. It had been a neighborhood that was just seriously crime infested a couple of years ago, and they had a community stakeholder team just come together and really start making some changes. So we met them a couple years ago and have brought them in. In fact, crazy story, I met their program manager walking on the street at Chattanooga at a placemaking convention. We just happened to bump into each other and we started talking. And so we brought them in this year, and we're super excited to be working with them. They've got a huge development project going on that's a community. It's an old church all it is the brick walls, no ceiling, grass floor, that they're going to be converting into a public venue for that entire neighborhood. And there's some other private pieces that we're looking at, working on helping them develop out. So we brought them in this year, super excited. And then we brought in a county, an entire county this year, with 7 cities. So we're piloting the neighborhood, and we're piloting the county, but working with all sizes of cities. And like I said, we've got 14 communities, but we really believe that this program is something that can be utilized in any situation, in a neighborhood, in a large city, in a small city, on a regional level, on a county level. So as we continue this program, we track everything that we do. Oh, yay, shout out from Canton. They're one of our cities. And you're going to be excited, Brooke, because our workshop today is focused on Canton. That'll be fun. What do you think is the rate of adoption of this style? Are we in a space place where the changeover is occurring? I love this question, Wayne. Thank you for asking that. When I mentioned COVID, we saw on our city level, we saw such an interest in this program once COVID hit the cities, because they realized they couldn't keep doing what they had been doing in the past, their traditional development and community and economic development. And we just saw a flood of applications this year from our cities to learn this process and get it implemented. So we're having 2.5 years old. It's not super old, but we are already up to 14 communities, and we're expanding into bigger communities like the counties. And I'm kind of working on a regional piece right now that we're going to test out. But great question. And thank you for trying to teach people about this approach. Just word of mouth, the more we can teach, the better. Any good websites or books to read about? Oops, where'd that one go? Any good websites or books to read about the place-based approach more in depth? Melanie, that's a great question. We learned a lot of what we are doing through Project for Public Spaces, and then I'm a PhD student, and I'm working on my dissertation in this field, and a lot of what I read is journal articles. So there isn't one really good approach to this. It's more of an amalgamation of what you can make work, and that's really what we do with this training process. Is when I was writing the curriculum for this program, I would just take pieces here and there from different academics and different people that have tried different things. And then the real big piece of what we do is teaching them how to actually do economic development projects. And that just comes from my background as being an economic development director. So we just added that place-based component to that. We don't have, I'll have to think about that, what might be a good book or website, but truly I just kind of have used a lot of stuff that's been developed over the last 20 years to create this program. Did I get everyone's question? Oh, Faith, this is a good one. What is the best way to get the community involved, surveys, forums, etc.? And what do you suggest for reaching a wide range of people for your audience? With the community team, once we get that community team together, they become the cheerleaders for this. And so you see a lot of, it is a lot of grassroots, it is a lot of word of mouth, but we do provide marketing training for marketing this program in the community. We do it through press releases. We make sure that as they're doing their projects are being marketed, and that they're being marketed as placemaking, as place-based projects, as part of the place-based, part of our placemaking collaborative. So we are trying to just brand this as we go.
Stephanie, we had a couple of questions over in the feed section.
In the feed? Okay.
Can we get these slides?
Yes, absolutely.
And we'll figure out how to share those with everyone. And is there a similar organization for Alabama that you know of? There's not in Alabama. We're pretty unique. There's not really a similar organization anywhere except for in Georgia. We worked, the Michigan Municipal League
we worked with them when we were first creating this program. They've got some great, some rock star examples of placemaking. But what we're doing is actually based on the Georgia Community Initiative for Housing, which is our GIC program. The model of our program was based off of that program, which is focused on housing, equity and inclusion in housing and housing development in cities. So it's pretty unique. But we're always happy. You're our neighbors. We're happy to share. Did I get everybody?
One more question. How do we get in touch with you to get more information?
I'll throw that right in the feed for you.
Okay. And in the meantime, we can go ahead and start that video.
Yep, let's do it. So before you do it, Rusty, let me just give a little brief introduction. This is from the city of Monroe, Georgia, and they're just showing you some of the downtown, some of the things that they've been doing in their downtown relative to place-based economic development and place-making. And she talks a lot about the community connections. One of the things that we really try to focus on is funding. Funding these projects everybody knows funding projects is difficult. So Sadie is their economic development director from the city of Monroe. And Rusty, if you go ahead and roll that video, it's pretty self-explanatory.
So hey, we're in downtown Monroe. We're gonna walk you around, show you some of our projects. And the first one I'm gonna show you is our Monroe mural. We got a local window painter and a grant from the Georgia Council for the Arts, and she designed a Monroe mural that kind of identifies you are here now, and she designed it with images that define Monroe in downtown. And we did this a couple years ago and got a facade easement on this private building. The Council for the Arts paid for half of it, and then we raised local funds to pay for the rest of it. So that's the first project, and we'll keep walking, and you'll see our planters that we use sponsorship money to replant every year, and our streetscaping to try to create a great sense of place downtown. So let's go and walk. So we're inside Elevate Outfitters and Coffee Camper in Monroe, and just an example of how our local businesses have really jumped on the idea of branding this as a place. It's in all their logos, and they're actually working on a mural on the outside of their building right now. It's going to feature a mountain scene and talk about Monroe.
800 cash, that's a flip deal. I'm headed downtown, cruising through the alley.
So here's a building that's being renovated now, and you can see it's an older mural. It says "Welcome to Downtown Monroe," and points out parking in Children's Park. But the cool thing they did is, rather than just cover it construction, they used historic photos to tell the story of the building's progress over the years.
In the air, stop by Pipe Place, throwing fish to a play. Downtown, 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 downtown. She has her arms around your waist. You're the balance that will keep her safe.
Our first murals we did in partnership with Monroe Walton Center for the Arts and some other local nonprofits that help pay for it and sponsor it. This is a city-owned building, so it was the easiest place to start, and this alleyway connects our historic courthouse and public parking. So we're trying to activate this alley to get people parking here and walking back and forth, and just have another space to take pictures.
Better follow me towards downtown. What you see is what you get, girl. Don't ever forget, girl. Ain't seen nothing yet until you're downtown. Get off my mother, stonewall, so raw, pay like a bullet.
Alright, here's our pocket park. The old safe in it. It's one of our first projects we did downtown, and we're actually about to do a major refresh to this one. Add some more shading. It has a little library hidden in there behind the bushes.
Had one helmet, I would give it to you. Give it to you. Cruising down Broadway, girl, what a wonderful view. Wonderful view. There's layers to the player.
Here we are at the Hammock Park, and it's also our Project Road Share, which is a map of cycling trails throughout Walton County. and this was funded through a crowdfunding campaign. This, along with some other play equipment around town, a Places to Play campaign, we raised $15,000 to do this, an activity alley, and add some new swings and slides. Her group give us donations for some of the instruments. We had Kiwanis Club give us another donation for instruments. And I should have mentioned Rotary gave us a donation for hammock park. So a lot of our civic clubs kind of jumped in when they saw us doing crowdfunding and matched a lot of what individuals gave.
She has her arms around your waist. You're the balance that will keep her safe. Have you ever felt the warmth?
Now we're in front of City Hall, and this is the project we did. Just get one of our farmers market woodworkers to build some chairs, get community service kids, paint them, and put them around the fountain. The community brought us this idea. We'd seen it somewhere else and shared it on Facebook, and we helped make it happen.
Girl, don't ever forget, girl, ain't seen nothing yet until you're downtown. You don't want no people, y'all on the streets.
That always makes me so happy to watch. They've done just some amazing work in downtown Monroe. And as you saw, different pieces of the community came together to help fund that. And that's really what development should be about, is the community having a vision, the community having a say, the community having a financial investment. And once again, it's that bottom-up approach to development. And as you can see that creative placemaking thread through everything that they were doing. And what's great is she used the word activating spaces. So when we get with our community teams, we put a map down, we look at the maps of the city, and we look at the spaces in the city, and we talk about how we can activate and renovate and rehabilitate those spaces. It could be an alley, it could be a parklet, it could be a full-blown community building, it could be, like I said, we're working with this Atlanta neighborhood to do this huge church, this old historic church, into an event venue, as well as right across the street from that, talking to the business owners about how they can develop complementary business to that space. So it's really about getting in and getting boots on the ground with the community. And you can't do that if you're not being equitable and inclusive. You absolutely cannot do this kind of development. And this is sustainable development. It lasts for a long time. And when we teach this process, the idea is that this process will be passed down to generation, that once you make this community paradigm shift, that becomes the philosophy that the community uses moving forward to do any kind of development. So this is a place-based economic development workshop, and I did give you a little foreshadow that it's based in the city of Canton, Georgia, which Canton's one of our placemaking collaborative communities, and this one is really interesting. So this is kind of in North Georgia, and it has a very high Latino population, the city of Canton does. And so we're going to be looking at their Latino commercial and residential corridor. And what I'm going to ask from you guys today is we're going to create a place-based development project idea and a strategy. So we want to make sure that any ideas that we're throwing out there are equitable, inclusive, and then address an economic or community development need or issue in the community, and that they're trackable and supports the city vision for the corridor. So I'll give you all that information in just a second, but those are your goals. Okay, so Canton demographics. Population, 32,550. Median household income, 67. Poverty rate is almost 20, it's pretty high. Median age, 33. Home ownership, 49. The race composition is white, 55. Latino, 30. Black, 9.47, Asian 1.96, 2 or more races 1.45, and then some other is and Native American very, very low. So we're looking at a large Latino population in the city of Canton, and they are predominantly centered in a particular neighborhood. So the city vision for this corridor in this neighborhood where this Latino population not only lives but actually has a lot of businesses is the city would like to highlight the Latino identity and culture in this neighborhood. They'd like to augment the commercial potential for the corridor businesses. They'd like to develop amenities for the residents and the visitors in this area. They'd like to create alternative transportation opportunities to connect the corridor to the new Etowah Mills and the historic downtown. I'll show you where that is in just a second, so you have a visual of that. And they want to create new partnerships that contribute to job creation and increase the tax base in the corridor. So this is a great community vision that they have, that they derived from their community team. And once again, we always start with a demographic analysis. We really want to make sure that our teams are representing the demographic and that the needs are addressed. When we do demographic analysis, we also do an asset inventory, and then we do a place visioning session with our teams where we identify specific places, identify the needs in those places, and look at the demographics and look at the assets and figure out solutions to those needs and those issues. Okay, so here are the corridor assets. So once again, we go through, we always identify assets before we embark on this. Let me just point out a couple things on the map so that we have a better visual of what we're looking at. So this is the downtown, the historic downtown, and they've got a really great revitalized historic downtown. It's thriving, it's doing really, really well. Then they recently connected their downtown to this area, which is called the Etowah Mills Complex. It's an old mill that has been converted into a retail center and an activity center. It's got a Reformation Brewery, which is a local brewery that moved from Woodstock, Georgia, over to Canton, Georgia. Right here is the river. So you've got this river walk, and the river goes around like this. And then right here on Marietta Road, starting here, so it's really close to this Reformation and this Etowah Mills area, is our Latino area, and it takes up this whole area. It's right here. So we have Latino businesses here, and then we have the residences that flank these businesses. Right here is a city-owned baseball field that's basically abandoned. It's not being used at all. It's very underutilized. That's the Harmon Ball Field. And then we've also got these are privately owned green spaces. They're just this big, huge green space. This is privately owned. And it's adjacent to this Etowah Mills. So we've got some great assets here. You've got an active and organized Latino community. You've got a river and a river walk, large green fields near the river, underutilized Harmon Ball Field, Latino businesses on Marietta Road, residences surrounding this corridor, and adjacent to the new renovated mill on the Etowah complex. So brewery, restaurants, co-working spaces, etc. right here. There's some potential for connectivity. And then it's near the historic district in the main center of town. And there's a lot of developable properties, particularly this one. So those are your assets. This is a visual. I'm just going to go through some of the assets really quick so you can see them. This is the Harmon Street Ballpark. This is that commercial piece right here with the commercial, the Latino commercial businesses, the ballpark. See, everything's really close together. And then these big green fields that are privately owned. Here's a different ballpark, Latino housing, Latino businesses. And then right up the road, we've got the Etowah Mills complex right here. There's a river walk that goes all the way around here. And once again, these ball fields. Green spaces, sorry. Okay, so your objectives is to create an equitable, inclusive project that addresses needs or issues in that area and that's trackable and can support the vision. So what I'm looking for today is just, throw your project ideas and maybe some potential project partners into the feed, or let's use the Q&A, into the Q&A, and then we can have some discussion on your ideas that you came up with. So let me, I'm going to go back so you can look at this area one more time because I'm going to have to pull it down. But once again, we've got the downtown, we've got the Etowah Mills with the brewery and the restaurants, newly developed, river walk, private green space. I will say one thing about the private green space that you should probably know, and that is the Latino community uses it to play soccer on unofficially. And then we've got our Latino businesses, our Harmon Ball Field right here that's underutilized by the city, and then our Latino residences. All right, I'm gonna exit out of that. Okay. Let me start here. I'm gonna get I think, Rusty, it would be great if we just had some live discussion. So if you guys have a comment or a question, I'd love to hear it live instead of reading through the feed. If anyone wants to pop in.
Well, I'll be glad to read some of these out for you if you want
to
would you? Do them
okay.
As well. Jean suggests maybe some art festivals, Day of the Dead and other cultural festivals in this area.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love it.
Faith thinks that utilizing and maybe updating both the baseball field and the soccer field, updating those amenities could be useful.
Yeah, and the city is actually contemplating that. The one catch for that, the green field is that it's privately owned. So that would be something that the city or the community would need to acquire. But yeah, definitely agree with that.
Rebecca suggests a walkable trail connecting the green space, the brewery, and the stadium.
That'd be great. Love it. Lydia, we do have representation of the Latino community, but it might be nice to have an actual committee that works with our community team. I love that idea. I love it.
T. Lily suggests using the local Latinx artists to develop a logo or a brand for the area.
The team is actually doing that. Fantastic idea. And they're actually they've decided on Sunnyside, because they used to refer to it as that a long time ago. There's some history behind that, but yeah, that's something they're working on right now. It's great.
Alex suggested using some of the underutilized space as a performance or festival area.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really large space. That'd be perfect. Has seating already.
We've got some folks with their hands raised, so
okay.
let's bring Marisol to the stage with her comment.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay. So my suggestion was that the whole baseball field could be turned into an official soccer field with perhaps a community center toward or Latino, like a pool, like a YMCA sort of thing with a swimming pool. It's just wishing what I will really love for my area, and you have this spot already designed. I wish I had that in here, but I'm loving this. So that's just my opinion on that.
Well, and this is a really good example of cities, if they're going to be doing development or partnering for development, making sure that they're talking to the residents and the community and not just the people that are your traditional stakeholders. We want to do stakeholder recruitment. We talk a lot about that in our collaborative. With Canton, when they first formed their team, they didn't have any Latino representation, and we're like, hey guys,
wow.
We're not going to move forward on this until you have some Latino representation. And it took them a little while to they had to kind of go door knocking and had to do some rooting around to find out who was the spokesperson in the community. And that's really important. Sometimes when you're looking to develop your stakeholder team, you have to go do some grassroots knocking on doors to find out who, wants to be on the team and who's willing to represent the neighborhood and who's willing to speak out and participate. And sometimes that's a challenge for our teams, but we make it mandatory. It's not
absolutely. And I truly commend you for that, because Lydia, our leader for our pod, that's one of the things that we so much want to elevate, that simple fact that many times the Latino, there are great community leaders, but they just not being approached. And that's one of the things that Lydia have always taught us. And we keep pushing forward to all our entities around our cities and communities. You must know how to relate to us in order to be really, truly inclusive. So I absolutely, I'm loving this. I am soaking it all in.
I did grow up in Northern California, so I was the minority in Northern California.
My goodness, so you are the right person for your position. My goodness.
It's fun.
Okay.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you, Marisol.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Hi, Rachel.
You can turn your camera on at the bottom of your screen, Rachel, if you want to.
I do. Hi.
There you
Hi.
So I was thinking for a ballpark. We have a very similar situation in our downtown, where we have a space that is used for the farmers market, which, I mean, it's great for certain times of the year, but other than that, it's kind of underutilized. So I was thinking for that baseball field, the city, since the city owns it, it would be a great thing to do to maybe reallocate city funds to make that into a outdoor performance space. I know that, that would require some construction, especially if you make it to where it's a performance space where you can actually perform if it's still raining, or perform if it's, all weather kind of performances. But that way it's being utilized, but it's also would encourage arts a little more. And then someone mentioned that already, but I was just kind of thinking about when I was in college, one of the best hangout spots for us when we were in between classes was our outdoor shell, our performance shell. The acoustics there are great. And it encourages a lot of people to just kind of pop in and perform. And in general, it's free.
Right. And the other thing about doing that, and Terrence just threw in that they could use it for Latino multicultural community art programs. Yeah. And that's the whole thing, is the city making this connection with the Latino community, instead of just going and doing code enforcement in that area, actually talking to the community and find out what they want, and then providing them with a venue that the city doesn't have to program that venue. That's what we're trying to teach the cities, is you're creating partnerships and collaborations. So you provide a venue, let the community, provide the art and the entertainment. And the other thing that happens with that, by putting in art and entertainment in that area, is, guess what? We're going to stimulate those businesses that butt right up against that park. So this is all about this, what I call bottom-up approach. It's a bottom-up approach to economic development. You start building on it, and then the economy changes because you create meaningful spaces and people invest in them. So yeah, love it. Love your idea. Thanks. Appreciate it, Rachel.
Yeah, of course.
Who's next? Love this, you guys. Hi, Stephanie.
You can turn on your camera if you want to.
Oh, hi. I put them in the comments as well, but I was just thinking about one of the things about a ballpark is that it's already existing and you can adapt it. So one of the advantages is that it already has parking and people know where it is, and it's already flattened earth, so you can sort of apply, like you can drive cars on it and you can do things. It has utilities out there. So, it could be a matter of like just breaking up the space a little bit differently and then having a reservable space. So you have some that were like private dog park. We have some private dog parks here in Athens, our county, that are fantastic. So you can just like reserve it for 1 hour and bring your dog and have play. And then same idea, you could have smaller areas that were just like mini soccer fields, and then a registration system that people could propose farmers markets, flea markets, pop-up food nights, and then also performances, so that the space is still, like I said, because of the flattened surface, it makes it easier to put like a mobile stage or bring any kind of like material, like a tent or resources onto the site. It's got a lot of adaptability, which is one of the biggest advantages of it. So it has parking and bathrooms. So that's great. That's already there. So you can create more of like a blank canvas with these sort of reservable spaces, so that people can bring whatever they're interested in to this place, and then build their own content, build their own activities.
I love that idea of reservable space. That and quite honestly, once again, I used to be a city employee. Taking the pressure off a city employee to always be doing the events and the programming, cities don't always have resources to do that. But if you just have a reservable space and there's guidelines for that space, I love it. That's a great idea.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie. And next we have Alex.
Hi, Alex.
Hi. Sorry, I'm wrestling a baby, so I may not perfectly. Here we go. Okay. I had said it in the comments, but I thought the idea of somebody had talked about a Day of the Dead parade and linking the brewery to the businesses through some sort of parade or route makes a lot of sense and could be really nice.
That's a great idea. You really visualize that distance. It's not horrible, and it's already and it's a great street that could easily be blocked off by the city, and it's already streetscape. That whole area is streetscaped, so it's very attractive. I love it. And then there's those 2 retail centers right next to it where there's huge open parking lots. So that could be, and then the green spaces and the ballpark. So yeah, that's a great idea.
The other comment I threw in the chat as we were doing it that way was to just say, I'm sure that there are local organizations that can utilize any of these venues or things that get created, but to remember that we're asking them then to increase their overall programming, so that we may need to set aside some dollars to grant funds specifically into any venue that gets created or any specific program that wants to get locked into this organization. Or is there a way to uplift organizations in the community already through some specific grant programming?
I like the idea of grant programming relative to the spaces. That's really cool idea. That is a really cool idea. I'm gonna rip that off. I love it.
Thanks, Alex. How great is it that we can have a conference where you can attend and feed your baby at the same time?
Before, I kind of want to address Terry's. Terry, she asked, are you seeing cities codify the process by not only, where did it go? Codify the process, but requiring community spaces in new developments, indoor, outdoor for locally led placemaking programs. We talk a lot about codifying in our collaborative, and because the city sponsor the teams, we have the opportunity for the teams to take those kind of options to the city to look at altering codes, particularly for new developments. And in the state of Georgia, outdoor alcohol is becoming really popular, which is really funny because 10 years ago we had dry cities and dry counties. And now with COVID, every city is scrambling to recodify their downtown, so they have what they call entertainment districts. Yeah, the great question, Terry. And coding is something that we talk a lot about in the collaborative. It's really important, and that's part of getting that community input right straight to the elected officials. So we've got an elected official on our teams, so they have to hear it. They have to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly from our teams.
Looks like we have a question from Yvette.
Oh,
Hey, Yvette.
hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
So it really wasn't a question more than it was a comment about the biggest cultural asset that they have is an active and organized Latino community. So with that said, then there's got to be some traditions and some history there and some culture that is celebrated. And where they have the strip mall where there are businesses there, to create like a cultural district that is there. And since it's also adjacent to a downtown historic community already, that they make the connection with the rich history that is there. You know, they've got to have the aesthetics for every community is going to be different. So they've got to have, you know, the oldest restaurant or the first this or first that, which is not celebrated, you know, and create that, and that can connect the downtown historic that exists to the cultural district there, into the corridor that also wraps around into the they create a loop, if you will, around the Riverwalk and all that too. And just to have, I guess, the green space that's in there that's privately owned, is there, do they know what the intentions for that property?
They're still having talks with the property owner, but the property owner doesn't want to sell it. This kind of goes along with the question that Faith's asking right now: is how do you deal with property owners? That's a whole nother session I would love to do for you guys. Is dealing with property owners and how you get property owners on board with a community vision. It is not an easy task.
Yeah,
it's not an easy task. So Faith, if you want to call me sometime or email me, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. But Yvette, I love your vision, and you absolutely caught the whole vision of that area. And you're right. Everything needs to be connected, but it can still have its own identity. You have your downtown, your Etowah Mills, and it can all have its own identity, but it needs to all be connected. I love it.
Mm-hmm. And then the buy-in from downtown to embrace it as part of their part
of the heritage. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Yvette. We've got about 10 minutes.
We do? Okay, great. Let's keep this going. I'm loving the dialogue.
So feel free to raise your hands, but in the meantime, we can go back to Q&A. But we've had lots of people putting their suggestions and input into the Q&A. So do you want me to read those to you, or you want to?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Kim says, consider renaming the underutilized park after someone significant from the Latinx community.
God, Kim, you would think that would be a no-brainer, but no one has suggested that yet. So thank you. I will make a note of that.
Let's see. Faith, we may have already addressed this. I really want to do something with a green space in downtown, but it's privately owned. You addressed that, didn't you?
Yeah, seriously, Faith, feel free to reach out to me. I have some strategies for that, and it's something we do come across on a regular basis.
Day of the Dead Festival. Someone suggesting create a cultural district there. Does the state of Georgia have a cultural district program? Are you aware of?
We do not on the state level. That would be something that would have to happen on a community level. We don't, unfortunately. I want to do a shout for Brooke. She's chiming in for Canton, and she's like, I don't want people to miss that we have already received a grant to use the underutilized baseball field area as a mini soccer pitch. And they did. They ended up, and that was amazing that they got that $75,000 grant for that. So they are integrating that into their placemaking plans. And once again, soccer is more important in that community than baseball. So thanks, Brooke.
Whoops. Every time a new comment comes in, it makes the feed jump back to the
I know,
top.
I was having a hard time following the feed too because it kept jumping.
Someone was suggesting community garden.
There's lots of green space down there if they can wrangle that owner into selling.
Let's go back to some, Lydia has raised her hand, so let's bring Lydia
Okay, great.
up to the stage. And Lydia,
Hello, everyone.
you can turn your camera on if you want to.
Camera, see, what is it? I do, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hola. I'm a Latina. I'm from Puerto Rico. I've been working with the Smart City I've been here for 30 years though, but I've been working with my city of North Charleston, South Carolina since 2005. And what I learned, and this is for every city that I think, especially my state, South Carolina. So they said disconnect. Yesterday I have a 4 hours, 2 hours meeting because of all the meetings that I have with the mayor of my city, with every director of every department, where we talk about how to start to communicate better with the community grassroots level. We had to talk about the mom and dad. And what I mean with that is that the cities, it needs to really be intentional. And that is the lack part. I'm glad that you guys been so successful. I'm glad to hear what is happening. But we have to be very intentional. And that is when it comes to inclusion, the Latino population, with my experience as a leader, they are not feeling the love.
I would agree, and we went through this with Canton. It took a long time to get that representation on that community team, because there was a lot of hesitation and there wasn't a lot of trust between the Latino community and the city. So that relationship had to be cultivated.
How we solve that issue, Marisol is here as well. We took 14 grassroots leaders, mom and dad, that were afraid of the city and everybody. And now we do live shows in Facebook to talk to the city and to the community. Mom and dad never did it before. So they are the leaders now.
I love it.
Stepping back to let them speak up, and the city must have them on the table, not in the middle of the organization of anything when it comes to Latinos, but from the start.
Well, and when we go into our communities and do demographics analysis, this is one of the things we stress, and we say to them, look at not just their community team, look at your city, look at your boards, look at your committees. Is your demographic being represented on all of your boards and committees, on your city council, or anything? Is your community being represented? Are the people that are making decisions and the leadership for the community, are they representing the actual community? And that's the question that needs to be asked in every single community if they want to do any kind of development, if they want to start looking at improving their long-term success for their city. Are you doing a demographics analysis, and are you making sure that as you are creating committees and doing projects that your demographic and your community is represented?
So, and the last thing that I'm going to say is that the city of North Charleston in South Carolina, we are the only city that nothing is done for the Hispanic community until the grassroots is talking with them. That is part of the progress. It's been done. We've done it every day. And sincerely, I want to make sure to let you, every city, they need to have us talking first. We need to be able to talk first. And when you send that message, we've been successful. We're going to keep doing it. So thank you for what you do. I love your city. I need to go there. And I'm going to visit. I promise you that.
Thank you, Lydia, for what you do. Love it. Thank you for the comments. There was a question I wanted to answer. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Oh, from Connor. Connor, he says, reiterating a question asked earlier, how do the communities you work with establish maintenance agreements for the placemaking projects they build? It seems there's always funding for new ideas, but rarely funds for sustained success. Connor, thank you for asking that question. Part of the curriculum that we teach has, when we teach project development, there's a very specific part of the curriculum that we teach project development, and I made a very intentional point to add in maintenance of projects into that. So when we do financing projects and budgeting for projects and project implementation, they have to take into consideration the maintenance and management of those projects. So that's we teach that team how to do that. Great question. Anyone else? We got some raised hands. Looks like Rusty, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk over a muted. I'll go to raised hands. Rebecca's got a question in the feed about is there a community analysis or report available to take into consideration while generating ideas for this workshop?
Oh, right now, no. I kind of tried to keep it simple and just use the demographics, because this is really how we start with our teams. We do baby steps with them, but we do take that into consideration once we get into the visioning and planning part of which is year 2. We get into that where we will bring in any type of community reporting, any type of master planning that they've done, any kind of research that we can gather, we bring that into the visioning and planning process. But for today's activity, you just get the demographics and the assets.
And we're down to about 2 minutes. So
okay.
Connor asked that great question earlier, and now he wants to come to the stage. So
hop in, Connor.
Hey there. Just want to follow up. Thank you for answering that. But about just digging more into this idea of maintenance for public art projects and stuff like that. So I'm the sole placemaking guy at our small but mighty economic development organization administering a business improvement district in downtown Durham, North Carolina. So, you know, much of our program is micro grants of $3,000 and $5,000 to just give to artists and say, we'll handle the permits, we'll handle the, you know, stakeholder stuff. You go and do your stuff. However, and we also, you know, we go through a budget oversight process and stuff so that, but we come down to the issue that we're working with independent artists, many of whom work other jobs, but are still, you know, I view as vitally important to the city's cultural development. They don't necessarily have the capacity, the bandwidth to maintain a sculpture. Might get vandalized, you know, for 10-year thing. So what do you recommend for those cities?
So you guys are an independent organization, correct? Independent EDO, okay. So this goes back to this whole collaborative thing where you want to get together with your city, because you're providing an asset for your city by doing public art and doing placemaking. You're providing an economic and community development asset for your city.
Oh yes, we are.
So it would not be unreasonable for your organization. I'm assuming you're nonprofit, correct? And I'm not 100% familiar with all of North Carolina's economic development laws, but I can tell you that most cities in the United States are allowed to grant funds and services, in-kind services, to nonprofit organizations if they provide a type of community benefit, particularly if it's economic or community development. So you would negotiate that with your city. In the state of Georgia, this is kind of interesting. We're allowed to levy 3 mils of tax dollars from our downtown to give towards authorities and other development organizations to do development. And that what you do is considered economic development. So there's ways, look at your state laws, look at your state financing mechanisms, and there might be a way for you to go into an intergovernmental agreement or a memorandum of understanding with the city to provide maintenance in the event that something really catastrophic happens. We did have something like that happen with one of our public art projects, totally got vandalized, and the city came in and cleaned it up and did a grant for it. So there's ways to,
we're
you know,
556, so we already get much of our funds from private fundraisers, but the majority of our funds from the city itself. But a lot of this comes down to personnel, like who's qualified to maintain this, how are those contracts administered. But I know we're reaching time, but thank you for just getting us started.
Yeah, no, it's one of those, you just have to work through it. You just have to work through it. And that's really what this place-based economic development is about, is bringing everyone to the table and saying, well, you know, we've addressed this issue, but we still have this need. how can we as a community solve this need? How can we fund this need? And if you remember from the video that from Monroe, they do a lot of crowdsource funding. So that's always an option that a lot of people don't take into consideration. If your community's invested, they'll also be invested physically, like sweat equity, or financially. So you have to have those open dialogues and bring as many people and resources to the table that you can.
Wonderful, thanks, Steph. You're
welcome. Well, thank you everyone for your ideas and your participation. This has been wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting with you, and I'm happy to share my presentation. I put my email address in the feed, and feel free to email me, and I'll get that to you. Or if you have any questions or want to chat, happy to do that as well.
Yeah, and I want to thank everyone for the robust discussion and the great participation with your ideas and your questions. We probably had a lot more than we were able to get to, so apologies if we didn't get to your specific comment, but Stephanie has provided her contact information in the feed, and we will, the conference facilitators will, I'm sure, make slides and presentations and recordings from the conference available after it's all done. So look for communication on that. With that, we're going to take a break for lunch. Stephanie, thank you so much for taking part in the conference. We really appreciate it. This has been great. The next session the set of sessions will resume at 1:40. So you have a chance to grab a bite to eat, catch up on some emails, and we hope to see you all back here at 1:40 for the afternoon sessions at the Creative Placemaking Summit. Thanks, guys. Have a great lunch.